Welcome back to bringing Jesus back into focus. I'm Christopher John Joseph in Australia. Born into the Jewish Christian church, I left when I was 16 because they were teaching lies that the Jewish God Yahweh, which is a two-headed God, it's not a monotheistic religion at all. They worship two completely opposing forces, a brutal, violent, murdering war god called Mars, Sekhmet, Ares, or Yahweh One. These are the cultures that had war gods: the Roman war god Mars, the Egyptian war god Sekhmet, the Greek war god Ares, and the Jewish war god Yahweh. They were all brutal, murdering, violent, genocidal maniacs. And the children, the worshippers who worshipped them, the Jews, the Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptians, when they had the chance, they go and murder and kill in the name of Mars, Ares, Sekhmet, Yahweh One. Same God, stinking, filthy, satanic war god. They all had a God of peace or love, placid God. Different temple. Romans had different temple. Pax. Greeks, Irene, different temple, different life force. You're a different child when you're in that temple. You're a child of love and peace. You go to Mars, you're a child of murder and killing. So this is the sort of thing that we're facing, is that you can't have two Yahwehs, because the Jews had a Yahweh God of love as well. But the problem is they didn't call their Yahweh God Amore, or whatever the Hebrew word is for love. They should have built another temple and put another God image in there, or no image, however they want to represent this God. And they should have said, that temple's the God of love. Let's go over to that temple and pray, because these people down the road at Jericho, should we kill them and steal their land and all their belongings, or should we love them? We'll go into the temple of love, the Yahweh of love, but of course it can't be called Yahweh, because if you already called your stinking, filthy, satanic war god Yahweh, you can't call the God of love Yahweh. You've got to call it something else. And they didn't. They came up with this very cunning idea. They figured if they called both opposing gods, opposite gods, by the same name, just the name, then they could love one another and love a bit more when they wanted to even others. But then they could also kill and murder and steal, because their God loves them when they love, and their God loves them when they murder and kill. You see how it works? It's a lie. It's a deception. They did it deliberately. Very cunning, very stupid. But anyway, that's the result you get, So you get what you make, sort of thing. So they should have just had two temples. Now the trouble is, this is poisoning the Christian religion, because these Jewish Christians keep teaching this rubbish that Jesus is the son of Yahweh. I say, no, he's not. What, he goes to Jericho and puts a sword through a baby, does he? Because that's what the Jews did at Jericho after Yahweh told them to go and do it. And the Jewish Christians haven't got a really good answer to that, but they say, yeah, God did that sometimes. A filthy, stinking, satanic, murdering God does that. Mars, Sekhmet, Ares, Yahweh One. They all do that. Not the God of love doesn't do that. So Jesus left the Jewish religion and he became enlightened. He had a spiritual awakening, is what they call it, and his mind became at one with love. He then taught that to children, but he had the Jewish children to teach first, because there is family, there is culture, and he knew they were worshipping a stinking, filthy war god. He even said so. He said, "You're children of your father Satan. All war gods are satanic, false, lying, murdering, thieving, stinking war gods." He said to their face, you're worshipping a war god. Stop it. And so they were almost trying to kill him, because he was blaspheming their God. But it's a two-headed God. It's a perverted God. He is only at one with love. So you might say he's only at love with the loving Yahweh of the Jewish religion. He recognizes and acknowledges that God, but it is a limited version of the ultimate God of everyone. That is the loving creator of your spiritual body. Spirit is love. You have a spiritual body. It's created from love, but you have to awaken it. You have to activate it. You activate it through having love come into you from heaven and give it to others. Share it with others. Don't block it by being violent or covering yourself in stinking murder. So I had to write these Gospels of Jesus to clarify things and clear his name. Rip out the book of Revelation. That's the stinking book of Daniel. Rip it out. It's a lie. It's filth. It's the most slanderous book about Jesus probably ever written. I'd say it'd have to be. It would have to be the most slanderous thing I've ever read about Jesus in my life, and about the God, the beautiful, loving God of Jesus as well, who doesn't commit infanticide like the war god of the Jews, or Mars, or Sekhmet. They're all the same. So that's the book. It's available now. Jesus taught we can all experience an inner spiritual awakening if we search for it. He called this the treasure hidden in the field of earth, of flesh. This is our eternal spiritual identity, empowered only by the loving spiritual life force of our loving spiritual creator. Our bodies of flesh are only temporary and empowered by earthly things, and all flesh dies. Only our spiritual body and soul mind of love lives on, to come into the presence of our loving creator, to reap as we have sown. And Jesus explains how to become alive to the spirit so you do not die. That's to say you pass through the death experience. We all experience the death experience, but you do not die if your spirit is alive and well and clean. So that's the contents of the book, and we're up to Matthew now. I think maybe part 9 or something. It's a long chapter, but I'll continue reading it now. I've really enjoyed helping Jesus and the loving spiritual creator of Jesus, who's created my spiritual life for me to have here on earth, where I awaken into it, and then later on I hope I am received into the heavenly spiritual world of love, because that's all I want to be here on earth. So I'm a dedicated pacifist Christian. I condemn all armies, navies and air forces in the world, and I support local police forces and coast guards and border patrols. We all need them for local gangsters and criminals and things where children become a bit satanic in your local community. So we need those sorts of forces, armed forces you might say, of police, etc., for local problems. But we must get rid of the armies of the world. They have to go. Instead, we should have fleets of ships, every nation, that have medical supplies, tractors, engineering equipment, cranes, everything that a country would need that's in trouble, devastated by an earthquake or flood, or where a war is going on, tents, prefab buildings, tractors to crops, seeds, plants, food, of course. We should have flotillas and armies and planes, navies loaded up with all peaceful things to help other children who are on earth who are in trouble, who are in a war-torn country still, with satanic children still demented, not in their spiritual identity, and help them. We shouldn't be a threat anymore to anyone. Only someone who brings life. If you worship Mars or Ares or Sekhmet or Yahweh One, all the satanic war gods, then you do the bidding of war gods. You kill, you murder. We are children of the living creator, the loving spiritual creator, so we live for spirit and life. I must only try my best to help children have life, in whether it's your family, friends, or people on the street. So Jesus at Passover. We'll move on now. I ramble on too much. I love talking about him too much. That's the trouble. Matthew 26:17-25. Now on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples asked Jesus, "Where will you have us prepare for you to eat the Passover?" He said, "Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar will meet you. Follow him, and wherever he enters, say to the householder, 'The teacher asks, where is the guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' And he will show you a large upper room furnished and ready to prepare for us." And they went and found it just as Jesus told them, and prepared the Passover. When evening came, he sat at table with the 12 disciples. Jesus said, "Truly I say to you, one of you who is eating with me will betray me." The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he was speaking about. And one after another they asked if they were the one, saying, "Is it I, teacher?" Jesus said, "It is the one who is dipping bread into the dish with me." One of his disciples, whom Jesus loved, was lying close to the breast of Jesus. So Simon Peter beckoned to him and said, "Tell us who it is of whom he speaks." So, being close to Jesus, he asked him, "Teacher, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is he to whom I shall give this morsel after I have dipped it." So, when he had dipped the morsel, He gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. Judas asked, "Is it I, teacher?" Jesus replied, "You have said so." "Yes, it is. I'm choosing you." Then after eating the morsel, Jesus said to him, "What you are going to do quickly." Jesus knew what he was going to do. Now no one at the table knew why he said this to him. Some thought that because Judas had the money box, Jesus was telling him to buy some more food for the feast, or that he should give something to the poor. So immediately after receiving the morsel, he went out, and it was night. So he left. Jesus said, "Go on, go and do what you have to do. Do it quickly." Author. Some believe Jesus actually wanted one of the disciples to lead the chief priest to him later that night when they were alone and vulnerable, so he could be arrested without causing trouble for the crowds who followed him. And then be charged and crucified and rise in his spiritual body from his dead body of flesh to fulfill his spiritual teachings. He was giving the disciples about us all having two bodies in one. There's no doubt Jesus is staging it. There's no doubt he wants one of them to go and bring the Jewish authorities to catch him. They were trying to do it. Remember the event in the temple? They sent the guards to seize him, but the crowd wouldn't let them. So he was worried about the crowd. You know, there could have been a big Barney if they came while the crowd was around him. The crowd would really start fighting for him. So he didn't want that. He didn't want anyone getting hurt. And he knew he had to die anyway because he had a spiritual body to display to the disciples before he went to the heavenly spiritual world. He knew he could do that. He knew he was allowed to do that, and even directed from the heavenly spiritual world to do it. His body of flesh remained behind. So he had to get someone to do it when they were vulnerable by themselves somewhere. So one of the disciples had to go and guide and tell the authorities where he was. He was, now's the time to get him. So Jesus chose Judas. So his statement would have been quite possibly this, more correctly. One of you at this table will have to betray me. Now he's committed now. He's going to let them kill him. He's giving in. He's avoided it a number of times. They nearly stoned him to death a number of times. They've killed his great friend John the Baptist, his close companion and relative, whom he shared the spiritual teachings with for sure, because their teachings are parallel. So that John would have known all about what he was in thinking about, and Jesus would have shared it with him. They'd already killed him. They tried to kill him a number of times. It was just a matter of time before they'd kill him. So he wanted to stage it at Passover, the sacrificial lamb business. So his statement was probably, one of you at this table will have to betray me. Then they naturally would have said, "I'm not doing it, teacher," or the response we have is it me? Do you want me to do it? I'm not going to do it. You don't want me to do it, do you? Says Peter. You don't want me to do it, says Thomas. I'm not going to betray you. You can imagine them all responding that way. One of you is going to have to betray me. And maybe Judas was not a betrayer at all, but in fact the only disciple willing to do as Jesus asked, which is why Jesus handed him the morsel of bread that he dipped. He may have known that Jesus was the only one who understood that this had to be done. Jesus may have had some inside knowledge which is not written. It may have been deleted. But Judas may well have understood completely what was going to happen, that he had another spiritual body. Judas may have known that. It's not written though. It's either been removed or it didn't exist. And that's all wrong anyway. He was just a bad egg, But it's interesting the way it's unfolded. He really is sort of choosing Judas. And it has to be done. Someone has to do it. So only someone who had a deep belief and trust in Jesus could voluntarily perform such an act as this, as his teacher's request. The others they just didn't want to betray him, We know Peter said, "Oh, they're not going to kill you, Lord. No, and that's not going to happen to you." He said, "Get behind me, Satan. You don't even know what you're talking about. I'm here for the work of spiritual awakening. You're acting like a man of flesh and blood and bones." Back at that point where Peter thought his body of flesh was going to die, "Oh no, we don't want you to die." You see, Peter wouldn't go and get the guards to arrest him, but Judas would. I've got a feeling that there have been things left out, and We don't know, of course. I can't comment. We haven't got enough evidence. But the way it's written, it almost sounds like Jesus is going to, one of them has to betray him. Then they say, oh, surely not me. Surely you don't want me to do it. I don't want to do it. You could just imagine them saying that. Then he says, look, I'll dip a bit of bread, and whoever I give this to, they've got to do it. So they would have all been just watching, and he gave it to Judas. Then he says, go on, you go and do it now. Go and betray me. Because, I know you'll do it for me. Judas says, okay, off you go. So it's a possibility. It certainly makes more sense to me, but we haven't got enough evidence about Judas. We haven't got enough writings about him. It's very, heavily, slanted towards, he went and killed himself. He felt remorse. He hung himself. He killed himself. But I don't know. I'm not so certain about that. Jesus clearly chooses Judas to do it. He knows what Judas is going to do. He doesn't stop him. If Judas was really evil intent, and didn't know that, didn't know that Jesus, knew that he was going to do it. If Judas knew that Jesus knew that he was going to do that, Judas would have been thinking, gee, Jesus knows that I'm going to go and betray him. Would he have gotten up and gone and done it? Or would he have gone, oh, gee, I better wait till another time. Gee, I feel really I really feel exposed now. Jesus knows what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and get him so they can catch him. It just seems not correct. A normal reaction would be, oh, no, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing anything. But Jesus tells him to go. Go on, off you go. You've got to go and do this for me. That to me seems a much more probable, real event. But as I say, we haven't got the dialogue, so I can't prove anything. But it's just the way it's written. It just seems to me that Judas was the only one willing to do it. That makes sense that the others wouldn't want to do it. That makes perfect sense. The Last Supper, Matthew 26:30. And as they were eating, Jesus took bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to the disciples, and said, take this and eat, for this represents my body of flesh, which I will give up for you. Do this in memory of me. After my body of flesh is dead and I'm gone, just remember when you eat some bread, Jesus sacrificed his bread, his body of bread, his body of flesh. Man does not live by bread alone, but by spirit as well. Then he took the cup and giving thanks said, drink of it all of you, for this is the cup of my blood, which is poured out for many, to reveal the new spiritual identity. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. In most Jewish Christian Gospels, that's translated as poured out for many to reveal the new covenant, for the new covenant. The word covenant in Greek means disposition. That is, your new character as a spiritual child of love in heaven. Also, Jesus taught we all have two different bodies with us right now. The temporary body of flesh is just food for the vultures when it dies, and it has no life anymore. It does not raise up from the dirt. Don't listen to those Jewish Christians. They're lying. It is our spiritual body and soul mind of love that leaves our dead body of flesh, and we are taken to be near our loving spiritual Creator, who created them for us to have in the heavenly spiritual world if we are prepared. Spirit gives birth to spirit. Flesh gives birth to flesh. You've got to be born again. Your earthly body can't create a spiritual body. Your spiritual body can't create an earthly body. They're planted together for some reason. I don't know why. The new covenant, as it is called, is in fact our new spiritual body and character that lives on as a spiritual child of our loving Creator in heaven. That's your new disposition. The Greek word for covenant actually means disposition. Your new character, the characteristics of your nature. When you're a spiritual child of love and non-violence, that is your new covenant. That is your new disposition. That's who you really are. It's an identity, your new identity. His death on the cross is saying, I'm letting them kill my body of flesh to reveal my true identity as a spiritual child, which you have in you also. That's what the death on the cross was all about. Dying on the cross doesn't save me from any sins. He says to me, you got to stop sinning. Christopher, if you're sinning, stop doing it. And say sorry to the loving Creator for sinning, because you shouldn't have done that with your beautiful spiritual life. Feel remorse for it, and she'll forgive you. Just ask her to say sorry, and she'll forgive you. That's how our sins are forgiven. We acknowledge them. We say sorry. We don't do them again, and we're forgiven. His blood on the cross does not wash your sins away, I assure you. You have to get rid of them. So it's a beautiful thing. But see, his words help you to wash yourself clean. It's his words that save you. He said that 17 times. He did not say, my blood cleanses you of your sin 17 times. It's only written once in Matthew in the whole Gospels, I think. And Matthew put that in anyway, as he put in other apocalyptic rubbish. Or who someone overwrote Matthew. It's one of the two. Someone's falsified Matthew's original documents. So that's the way it is. The new covenant is your new spiritual body. Disciples fall away. Matthew 26:30-35. Jesus said, you will all fall away from me this night, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. But after my spiritual body is raised up from my dead body of flesh, I will go before you into Galilee to meet you there. Peter said, though all may fall away from you, I will never fall away. Master, I am ready to go with you to prison and to death. Jesus said to him, truly, I say to you, this very night before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. Indeed, Satan has asked for you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, that your faith should not fail. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. But Peter adamantly replied, even if I must die with you, I will not deny you. The others all agreed. Author, the spiritual commitment that you have to have is based on understanding and believing we have another spiritual body with our body of flesh that does not die. That's a really powerful thing you have to have in your belief, your life, what you believe life is all about. If you've got that, you've got really, really powerful strength to deal with death. A beautiful, powerful way to look at death. If we doubt that, or are not yet spiritually awakened enough to have full belief in this truth, we will be reluctant to let go of our earthly life, whether threatened by other children with death or threatened by illness with death. Our spirit is not the flesh. They're different bodies. Jesus waits to be arrested. Matthew 26:36-46. Jesus and his disciples went to the Mount of Olives, to a garden called Gethsemane. He said to his disciples, rest here while I pray. And he took Peter, James and John with him, saying to them, my spirit is very sorrowful. Remain here and wait with me. He then went on a little further and spoke with our loving spiritual Creator, saying, if you want to save me from going through this, do so. However, I realize this is the real purpose of everything you have shown me, and I will do it. And after saying this, he came back to the disciples and found them sleeping, and said to them, why do you sleep? Rise up, for now the hour has come, and pray that you may not fall into the way of temptation. So he's basically getting ready. He knows Judas has gone to get them because he's told them to do it. He's chosen him to do it. They're isolated now in Gethsemane. He would have told Judas, we're going up to Gethsemane, bring them here. I'll be waiting there with the boys. Matthew 26:47, Jesus is arrested. While Jesus was speaking, a band of soldiers with swords and clubs and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, led by Judas, approached them, for Judas knew where he would be found. Then Jesus stepped forward and said, whom do you seek? They answered, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said, I am he. They stumbled backwards in surprise after hearing him say this so openly. Again he asked them, whom do you seek? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. So if you only seek me, then let these others go. Then one of his followers drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his ear. But Jesus said, no more of this. Put your sword back into its place, for all those who take the sword will perish by the sword. And he touched the ear of the slave and healed him. Jesus then said to those who came to arrest him, why have you come out with your swords and clubs as if to arrest a robber? Day after day I was with you in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness." And all of the disciples were frightened and fled from Jesus. And the band of soldiers and officers seized Jesus and bound him. Now this is really powerful stuff. I mean, Jesus is now fully committed to let them kill his body of flesh. He's told the disciples what's going to happen. He's tried to explain that they'll see him again in his spiritual body, but they don't understand that yet. They will when they see him later. Meanwhile, one of the disciples, still not a pacifist Christian yet, brings out the sword and attacks one of the servants and cuts the ear off. So what does Jesus do? He establishes here the pacifist message more than almost anywhere else. He does say, our loving Creator loves the enemy as much as the loving one. God's love is like the sun rises on the good and the evil. She loves all her children, no matter how evil you've become and how far away from your true identity you've gone. She knows inside you is still that spiritual, beautiful identity she gave you to be at one with. But then if you've committed filthy, stinking, warmongering crimes, you're going to have to go to hell for a while and suffer and scream and yell and be frightened out of your wits like you've never been frightened in your life, until finally you get through all your cleansing. But all spiritual children, of course, can go to heaven. So Jesus is trying to help the disciples understand, he who lives by the sword will perish by the sword. You must be a pacifist. You've got a spiritual body that doesn't die. You don't need the sword. Put it back in its place. We're not children of the sword, and for the first 312 years, all Christians were pacifists. It's a simple historical fact. It was destroyed by the corrupt Christians who became Jewish Christians and got the Christians to go back and worship the two-headed God of the Jews. That's just one of the things that's obvious. Jesus then said to those who came to arrest him, "Why have you come out with your swords and clubs as if to arrest a robber?" You see, he was in the synagogues, but they did try to arrest him. They tried to stone him to death, but he had to isolate himself for them to do it. He was just confronting them with, "Well, how come you're doing it now? What's changed? And of course, he's exposing their own evil to themselves. They're doing an evil thing for no reason. He's basically calling them out. You're sinning. You're committing an evil sin here. But he does it voluntarily. And Judas did what Jesus asked him to do. He brought them to the Garden of Gethsemane to capture him, to betray him. Someone had to do it, he said at the supper. And he gave Judas the job, and Judas did it. He fulfilled what Jesus wanted him to do. So in a sense, he was a follower of Jesus to the end. So the rest of the story about Judas, as I say, it's questionable, but we haven't got enough evidence, so I can't comment more than put a big question mark there and say he did what Jesus asked him to do. Matthew 26, 69, 75. Peter's denial. Simon Peter followed Jesus with another disciple, and as he entered the courtyard of the high priest, the maid, who kept the door, said to Peter, "Are you not also one of this man's disciples?" Peter said, "I am not." Number one. And he went out to the porch where another maid saw him and said to the bystanders, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." And again he denied it, saying, "I do not know the man." Number two. Then a little while later, another bystander said to him, "Certainly you are one of them, for you are a Galilean." But he began to swear by an oath that he did not know Jesus. Number three. And then the cock crowed, and Peter remembered what Jesus had predicted. "Before the cock crows, you will have denied me 3 times. And he broke down and wept bitterly. Jesus could see the frailty of them, He knew how far they could be tested before they break down and become beasts, like just flesh again, worried about the flesh dying. Jesus interrogated, Matthew 26, 57 to 68. Those who would see Jesus led him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where he and the scribes had gathered to question Jesus. Now the chief priests and the whole council questioned Jesus about his teachings and his disciples. Jesus answered, "I've always spoken openly to the world and have taught in synagogues and in the temple where all Jews came together. I've said nothing secretly. Why do you ask me these things? Ask those who have heard me, for they know what I have spoken." One of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" Jesus said, "If I have spoken wrongly, tell me what it is I said. But if I have spoken correctly, why do you strike me?" And the chief priests and the whole council tried to find witnesses to testify he had spoken blasphemy so they can kill him. And some bore false witness against him, but their testimony did not agree. And the high priest then stood up and said to Jesus, "Have you no answer to these accusations and testimonies against you?" But Jesus remained silent. Then the high priest said to him, "Tell us, are you the anointed one of our God?" Jesus said, "If I tell you, you will not believe me. And if I ask you, you will not answer. But as you say, I am." And the high priest tore his garments and said, "We need no more witnesses, for he has uttered blasphemy himself. You've all heard his blasphemy. What is your judgment?" They all answered, "He deserves death." Then they spat on his face and put a cover over his head and struck him, saying mockingly, "Prophesy to us, anointed one, who just struck you?" So he basically says, as you say, I am. Are you the anointed one of our God? Are you the Messiah of Yahweh? Are you the chosen one, the anointed one? He says, as you say, I am. If I tell you, you won't believe me. If I ask you, you won't answer. But as you say, I am. Now that was enough for him to create a setup where they had a reason to have him charged. He's claiming he's the Messiah, the anointed one of Yahweh. And that's enough of a blasphemy for them to want him killed. Pilate questions and judges Jesus. Matthew 27:11-26. When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders and scribes took counsel with each other how to put him to death. They decided to take him and deliver him to Pilate the governor. Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They said, "We found this man perverting our nation and forbidding us to give taxes to Caesar, and saying that he himself is the anointed one and king." Then Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said to him, "You have said so. But I am not of this earthly world. I came into the world to bear witness of the spiritual truth. Everyone who is of the spiritual truth hears my voice." Pilate then asked, "What is spiritual truth?" After he had said this, Pilate went out to the Jews and told them, "I find no crime in this man." Then the Jews became angry, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea and Galilee, and even here." And they accused him of many other things. Pilate returned to Jesus and said, "Do you hear all these charges they're making against you? Have you no answer to make?" But Jesus did not say anything, and this made Pilate wonder greatly about the situation. So when Pilate heard he was a Galilean, which belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was in Jerusalem at that time, passing the buck, Herod was glad to see Jesus, having heard so much about him, and hoped he would show him a sign or miracle. He questioned him at some length, but Jesus made no answer. The chief priests and scribes stood by, vehemently accusing him. So Herod and his soldiers treated him with contempt and mocked him, placed a splendid robe on him, and sent him back to Pilate. Pilate judges Jesus. When they brought Jesus back to Pilate, he said to them, "You said this man was perverting the people, but after examining him before you, I did not find this man guilty of any of the charges you made against him. Herod also found no guilt in him, sending him back to me. Therefore I find nothing he has done is deserving of death. I will chastise him and release him." So Pilate had him scourged, and the soldiers made a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and draped him in a purple robe. Then they said, "Hail the King of the Jews," and they struck him with their hands. Pretty brutal. Pilate then brought Jesus before the crowd. For someone who Pilate said hasn't done anything, still a fairly brutal sort of way to say, "Oh, you haven't done anything, I'll just bash you up for a while." Pilate then brought Jesus before the crowd, but the crowd continued to cry out against Jesus all the more. Pilate knew the custom at Passover was that he would release one prisoner that they asked to be set free. So Pilate brought out a violent prisoner called Barabbas, who had committed murder in the insurrection, and asked the Jews if they wanted him set free or Jesus. For he knew that it was out of envy of Jesus that the chief priests had delivered him up to be put to death. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd, getting them to call out to release Barabbas. Pilate asked them again who they wanted to set free, hoping they would choose Jesus. But they cried out all the more loudly to release Barabbas, not Jesus. Pilate then asked them, "What do you want me to do with this man Jesus whom you accuse?" They called out, "Let him be crucified." Pilate said, "Why? What evil has he done?" And they said, "If you release this man, you are no friend of Caesar. For he said he was the anointed one, the king of the Jews, which means he opposes Caesar." And Pilate said to them, "Do you want me to crucify your king?" And they shouted back, "We have no king but Caesar." And they all shouted even more loudly, "Crucify him," and kept on shouting. So Pilate did as they wanted and set Barabbas free. When Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather a riot was beginning to form, he finally gave in to their demands. So Pilate washed his hands in front of them and said, "I am innocent of this man's blood." And he gave sentence that their demands should be granted to crucify him, and he was led away to be crucified. So the general unfolding of his crucifixion is he stages it, he sets it up for the timing. They're trying to kill him all the time. He knows he can't live much longer without them stoning him to death at some point, because they try to do it. And they will do it. Eventually they will. So he knows he's running out of time, and so I guess he just figured it's too dangerous to stay much longer. It's best I do it now. And he does it at the Passover, which is the symbolic sacrificial lamb, cleanses you of your sins, that they sort of overwrote. Paul in particular, being an extremely Jewish follower of Jesus, he wrote that in very heavily, which has influenced the Christian church later on. But that's not the original meaning of the cross. You have two bodies. One dies and goes back to the earth, and one leaves and goes to heaven. That's the cross. Two bodies in one. And Jesus deliberately knew what he was doing, that his spiritual body would leave after they killed his body of flesh, but he knew he could appear to the disciples briefly in his beautiful, perfect spiritual body, the angelic body, and then he would leave and go to heaven. They wouldn't see him anymore, but he would appear to them briefly. He knew he was allowed to do that, and he did do that. So we've got this truth that's there in amongst the Gospels, but then it gets poisoned with these other Jewish overlays, which is what I removed, so that any Jewish Christian can see, oh, okay, well that makes more sense. Oh, I get it now. And that's what it's all about. You have to become awakened to your spiritual body and get ready to die. And your physical body's not rising from the earth. Forget that. That's not happening. You don't want it anyway, because you're going to have a body like an angel. I don't know what an angel body's like. I don't claim I know. I have no visions of heaven, no visions of angel. I've heard no voices from heaven. But I assure you I've had signs and wonders from heaven come into my life to help me. And that's just an absolute fact. I might share them one day. But they were really unusual signs at a time of great need. And I was talking, I always talk to heaven all the time, every day. I just talk to them, that's the way I pray, I talk. Talk too much. But I love talking about him. So he's staging that time, he's going to be captured, and he wants to be captured that night, and he sends Judas to go and get him. And he tells Judas, go and do it. And Judas says, okay, I'll do it. The others don't want to do it. Surely it's not me. Surely you're not asking me to do that. I don't want to do that. I mean, could you imagine Peter doing it? He wouldn't do it. Judas did it. As I say, we haven't got enough evidence to understand the fullness of this, and there may be things that have been destroyed. Judas may have been actually one of his closest disciples, the only one he could trust to do it. That would make sense to me. As for the committing suicide, well, okay, maybe Judas did do that. Maybe he just felt so depressed by what he had to do for Jesus that he couldn't handle it. Of course, he didn't need to do that, but it's apparently he did. It's written, but it could have been a cover-up too. As the same way they covered up that his body of flesh rose from the dirt or from the tomb, they covered that up. That didn't happen. His spiritual body rose. That's what they had to cover up. So they said his body of flesh rose, which is an old Jewish belief. That's why they had to say that. So there are distortions, but we don't need them anymore now. That was 2,000 years ago when the Jews didn't understand you had two bodies. But now we do understand it because, of course, we're far more involved in spiritual love and non-violence. Those of us who understand people like Buddha and Jesus, we understand that's the truth and that's the way out of this world to a better world. So, yep, so there you go. So that's we're up to Jesus is crucified, so we'll end there. And I'm really enjoying sharing the truth about Jesus' teachings. It could be done better. I could be far more charismatic and far more theological, and but I just speak from the heart, you see. I'm like the fisherman. I'm just a gardener, But Jesus' words go deep into simple children, I think. We just simply see the love and the non-violence of Jesus because it's obvious to simple children. But it's also highly logical, highly intelligent. So you can be very intellectually gifted, but still see the simple beauty of the love and non-violence. I have some ability to write or whatever, even though I'm a gardener, and I try my best to talk about him and write about him in a way which is articulate enough to convey his truthful teachings. I have enough ability to do that in a way which is accessible for anybody. I guess that's my role, that's my task, to reach people who want it to be delivered in a more simple way and in a more human way, and yet still contain some facts and some truths which are quite interesting, including interlinear Greek translations that are incorrect, which I point out. So there is a little bit of sort of theological work going on in the work I do, but predominantly it's just from the heart. Heaven exists. Jesus and Buddha too, they explain how you can get there. Follow his words, because he said if you follow my words and understand them, you'll wake up that you've got a spiritual body that doesn't die, but it's only empowered by love. So in this dangerous world, I have to become a child of love and nothing else, not violence. And there's the challenge. If you're a Christian, you can't be in the Army, Navy or Air Force and drop bombs on children or shoot guns at children and blow their heads off. You're not a Christian anymore. And if you are belonging to a Jewish Christian, well, you're just a Jew. I'm sorry. If you go and join armies and say you're a Christian, you're lying, or you're deceiving yourself. Because you can't do that if you're a Christian. You have to be a pacifist. Sorry. The truth is the truth. That's based on Jesus' teachings. It's not my opinion. That's his spiritual teaching, and Buddha's too, which I believe is correct. Love your way to heaven, or hate your way to hell. The choice is yours and mine. Free will choice. Jesus and the loving Creator will never throw you into hell. She doesn't commit infanticide like the war god of the Jews, Yahweh 1. That's a different God. Get over it. Wake up. Wake up, everybody. Yahweh's not the God of Jesus. Bye.